Chapter 51, Childhood Friends. Did my Aitg also get reborn? Jin Zuyan thought inwardly while he drove. The realization filled him with mixed emotions: sadness, excitement, and rage. He was heartbroken and furious that his Aitg had suffered the agony of being eaten alive. But at the same time, he was exhilarated that they had both been given a second chance. He wondered if she had returned with her abilities, just as he had. If that was the case, she would be stronger than in her previous life and better able to protect herself. At the same time, the soldiers were engaged in a gossip session over the radio. Zhang Yuan glanced at Qin Luzi, who was sitting in the passenger seat, and asked, "Old Qin, do you know who that girl is?" Qin Luzi swallowed the bread in his mouth before replying, "I don't know. This is the first time I have seen our captain get close to a girl. He didn't just get close, he kissed her. If they were alone, I bet that kiss wouldn't have ended so quickly," Qin Luzi added meaningfully. Hearing this, Zhang Yuan turned his head, nodded, and said, "I think so too. Did you see our captain's eyes? Those were the eyes of a hungry beast." Qin Luzi finished his bread, took a sip of water, and asked, "Old Zhang, are you sure it's wise to say that about our captain?" The moment he said this, a burst of laughter erupted from the radio. Zhang Yuan sucked in a sharp breath and said, "Damn it, I forgot the radio was on." "Brothers, please don't let the captain know what I said," he pleaded. "Vice Captain, if you are asking for a favor, you need to give us something in return," Aitg teased through the radio. Gritting his teeth, Zhang Yuan asked, "What do you want?" "Well, aren't we heading to the factory district? We need some clean underwear. We have been wearing the same pair for days. If we don't change soon, something bad might happen to our family jewels." Wen Kai's wail came through the radio. "Vice Captain, please have mercy on us," Aitg chimed in. "Vice Captain, the itch is killing us. Be a good person and help us out," another soldier added. A series of wails and complaints followed. Feeling a headache coming on, Zhang Yuan sighed and said, "Enough, enough. I will ask the captain to stop by the clothing factory." As soon as he said this, the soldiers cheered and thanked him in unison. "Thank you, Vice Captain." Fearing they might push their luck and ask for more, Zhang Yuan quickly put the radio back and let out a sigh of relief. Before he could wipe away his imaginary cold sweat, he heard Qin Luzi say, "I also want some clean towels." Zhang Yuan turned to glare at him and asked, "You have a closer relationship with the captain. Why don't you ask him yourself?" "I'm just a regular member, not the vice captain," Qin Luzi replied casually. Zhang Yuan rolled his eyes at Qin Luzi, but didn't say anything. They drove for more than 3 hours before reaching the factory district. Unlike the suburban area near Linen University, this district was neatly divided. Each factory occupied its own plot of land, with distances of around 200 to 500 meters between them. Since this area was designated for industrial use, it only had workers' dormitories without any residential neighborhoods. After spotting a signboard, Zhang Yuan slowed down and parked the armored vehicle by the roadside. One by one, the rest of the convoy followed suit, bringing their cars and trucks to a stop. As the soldiers climbed out of their vehicles, Pei Yijun and his team also stepped out and joined them. The last to approach was Jiao Lijai, carrying a backpack and following behind Jin Zuyan. Once they gathered, Zhang Yuan spoke up. "Captain, the nearest factories here include a clothing factory, a seed factory, a processed food factory, and a grain factory. Where should we start?" Jin Zuyan glanced at his soldiers' eager expressions and said, "We will start with the processed food factory, then check the clothing and grain factories. Empty your backpacks before we go in." "Yes, Captain," the soldiers responded in unison. After giving his orders, Jin Zuyan turned to Pei Yijun and said, "We are here to collect supplies. You and your team can take whatever you need." Pei Yijun nodded and replied, "Thanks." Then he looked at Jiao Lijai and asked, "Do you want to come with us?" Before she could reply, Jin Zuyan cut in, "She is coming with me." Raising an eyebrow, Jiao Lijai said, "I will go on my own." Hearing this, Jin Zuyan quickly said, Aitg, it's dangerous for you to go alone. I can protect you, so let me go with you. Considering the number of zombies likely lurking inside, she had to admit he had a point. Although she wasn't sure whether she could fully trust him yet, he was strong. With him around, her chances of survival would be higher. After weighing the pros and cons, she nodded and said, All right. Seeing her agreement, Jin Zuyan smiled and said, Wait here, I will go grab my backpack. As Zhao Lijai stood waiting and thought about gathering more seeds and what item needed to decorate her house inside her space, Chu Zhimil walked over and asked, Lijai, you and that guy. Zhao Lijai smiled and said, We are childhood friends. Letter 1D6 5B, letter 1D4 FB, letter 1D4 86, letter 1D4 86, letter 1D4 98, letter 1D6 5A, letter 1D6 58, letter 1D6 64, letter 1D6 62. Just friends, he kissed you. Will friends kiss each other on the lips? Chu Zhimiao said with disbelief. Well, we did promise to be together when we were kids, but that was years ago. I had almost forgotten about it, Zhao Lijai admitted awkwardly. Chu Zhimiao's eyes lit up when she heard her words and asked, So, you and he are a couple? Zhao Lijai glanced toward Pei Yijun and his team and thought for a moment. Chapter 52, Valuable Crystal 1. Zhao Lijai had no intention of staying with Pei Yijun's team. It was better to join the soldiers. After all, soldiers were the most trustworthy people in the apocalypse. No matter their flaws, their sense of duty and responsibility was high. They did their best to protect others, often sacrificing their lives for it. That was also why soldiers were among the first to be wiped out when the apocalypse began. By the time she died in her past life, there were no real soldiers left. The so-called soldiers, or guards, she saw later were just ability users hired by the base. Their loyalty followed whoever paid them the most, and to them, ordinary people were nothing more than disposable trash. Seeing Zhao Lijai lost in thought, Chu Zhimiao had her answer. Even though Zhao Lijai hadn't outright confirmed it, her reaction to being kissed said enough. She and Captain Jin must be together. Otherwise, why didn't she slap him when she was kissed suddenly? With that realization, Chu Zhimiao glanced at Pei Yijun and saw his dark expression. She sighed internally but didn't dare to say anything to comfort him. No one was at fault. Love was all about timing. Noticing that his team kept sneaking glances at him, Pei Yijun grew irritated. Get ready. We are heading to the processed food factory. Hearing his order, they didn't dare delay any longer and quickly prepared. Since they didn't have backpacks, they had to borrow sacks from the soldiers. 10 minutes later, everything was set. Zhao Lijai walked to her car and drove toward the factory entrance. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan immediately ran after her while shouting, Aitg, wait for me. She parked by the gate and stepped out. Holding a boning knife, she raised her hand and slashed at the chain. With a loud clang, the lock broke, and she pushed the gate open. Turning around, she looked at the soldiers and asked, You guys weren't planning to walk, were you? The factory grounds are huge. If you go on foot, it will take days to collect all the supplies. Letter 1D4BB, letter 1D633, letter 212F, letter 212F, letter 1D464, letter 212F, letter 1D4B7, letter 1D450, letter 2134, letter 1D45A. Hearing this, Jin Zuyan chuckled and said, All right, we will drive the cars. With his order, the soldiers climbed back into their vehicles and followed Zhao Lijai inside. As she drove, she glanced at Jin Zuyan sitting beside her and said, Brother Yan, I want to check out the seed factory. Aitg, can we go there after we finish with the other factories? Jin Zuyan asked. I don't want to leave my soldiers alone. Some of them still have high fevers, he added with a frown. Zhao Lijai's eyes flickered when she heard that. She thought for a moment and asked, Brother Yan, do any of you have awakened abilities? Jin Zuyan nodded and replied, Right now, 9 of us, including me, have awakened abilities. 6 are still in comas. The rest don't have any abilities. How many people are in your team? She asked. At her question, Jin Zuyan lowered his gaze. After a brief silence, he answered, 26. Noticing his somber mood, Jiao Lijai understood that there had been casualties before they met and said softly, "Brother Yan, I'm sorry." Jin Zuyan looked at her and smiled faintly. He reached out to hold her hand and said, "They were heroes who died on the line of duty. This is our duty and responsibility as soldiers, so you don't have to feel sorry." After that, the two of them fell into silence. Since the apocalypse began at dawn, only a few zombies wandered around the factory grounds. The rest were either trapped inside the dormitories or stuck at the guard posts. When they reached the warehouse area, they parked their cars and got out. The moment they opened the doors, the nearby zombies turned and rushed toward them. After the rain, most zombies had been upgraded to level 1, their bodies strengthened by the mysterious baptism. The soldiers, well-trained and battle-hardened, didn't panic when they saw the incoming zombies. Instead, they instinctively shifted into combat mode. Gripping their blades tightly, they stood back to back with their comrades and fought the approaching zombies. Since the zombies' strength and agility had increased, the soldiers formed two-man teams to handle each of the zombies so they could fight more effectively. Seeing this, Jiao Lijai pulled out her boning knife and joined the fight. She swung her arm, aiming for a zombie's neck. Crack! Her knife hit the target, but it didn't sever the neck completely. Roar! With its head half-chopped, the zombie let out a guttural growl and lunged at her, its claws slicing through the air toward her chest. When she saw this, Jiao Lijai reacted instantly. She let go of the knife and stepped back. Then, using her leg as a pivot, she spun around and delivered a powerful kick to the back of the embedded blade. Crack! This time, the added force sent the knife through the neck, beheading the zombie. Its head rolled to the ground as the body collapsed with a dull thud, and the ground was covered with black blood. Jiao Lijai bent down, retrieved her knife, and scanned her surroundings. The soldiers had the situation under control, swiftly killing the remaining zombies. With nothing left for her to do, she crouched down beside the zombie she had killed. Raising her knife again, she split open its skull. Stirring the rotting brain matter with the tip of her blade, she found what she was looking for, a small, transparent crystal core. She picked up the crystal, flicked her fingers to summon a small ball of water, and washed it clean before slipping it into her pocket. When she stood up, she noticed Chu Zhimiao watching her. There was doubt and surprise in her gaze, but Jiao Lijai had no intention of explaining. Chu Zhimiao recalled the small crystals in Mo Bingsu's pocket earlier, and now, seeing the soldiers picking them up as well, she realized these crystals must be valuable. She turned to Li Yang and said, "Li Yang, look at the soldiers. Should we also collect the crystals?" Chapter 53, Valuable Crystal 2. Li Yang had already noticed about the crystal, but the thought of digging through rotting brains made his stomach churn. He shook his head and said, "If you want them, get them yourself. I'm not touching that disgusting stuff." Chu Zhimiao pouted when he rejected her suggestion, but didn't argue. Gripping her kitchen knife tightly, she approached the corpse of a zombie their team had killed. Taking a deep breath, she raised her knife and chopped at its skull. Since her knife was sharp, she managed to split the head with 2 strikes. Black blood and putrid brain matter oozed out, releasing a stench so foul it made her gag. Urgh! She nearly vomited as the rancid smell hit her. With teary eyes, she forced herself to stir the mussy, rotten brain. After a few seconds, her fingers brushed against something hard. She had found a crystal. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. Creating a small ball of water, she carefully washed the crystal and her hands clean before keeping it into her pocket. Thanks to the soldiers, she and her team hadn't needed to fight much. By the time the zombies were cleared, her group had only killed 4 zombies. She went to check their heads. Out of the 4, only 1 contained a crystal. From this, she realized that although zombies had grown stronger, not all of them carried these crystals. If they were rare, then they were likely valuable. With this conclusion, the thought of digging through rotten brains no longer seemed unbearable. Not far away, Jiao Lijai watched her with an amused smile. Compared to the guys, Chu Zhimiao was more observant. 10 minutes later, the soldiers finished collecting their crystals and gathered around Chen Qianfeng. "Brother Qianfeng, help us wash these," Xiao Qi said. Chen Qianfeng snapped his fingers, summoning several floating balls of water above their palms. With another snap, the water balls burst apart, cleansing the crystals of blood and dirt. Once clean, Xiao Qi took out a bag from his storage space. The soldiers carefully placed the crystals inside before Xiao Qi tied the bag and stored it back into his space. At this moment, they had collected a total of 17 transparent crystals. Qin Luzi stood still for a moment before announcing, "Brothers, the area is clear. We can go inside." The soldiers nodded and walked toward the warehouse gate. Wenmo stepped forward and raised his hand. Within seconds, the heavy padlock clicked open. After removing the lock, they pushed the gate wide. When they saw the items inside, their eyes lit up. Inside, towering stacks of boxes filled the massive warehouse, reaching almost to the ceiling. Seeing this, the soldiers grinned from ear to ear. Without waiting for orders, they rushed inside and began loading the boxes onto the trucks. Standing nearby, Pei Yijun looked at his friends and said, "Let's go." Letter 1D6 5B, letter 1D4 FB, letter 1D4 86, letter 1D4 86, letter 1D4 98, letter 1D6 5A, letter 1D6 58, letter 1D6 64, letter 1D6 62. He and his team also started gathering supplies, filling their cars with food. Now that Chu Zhimao could produce 2 gallons of water daily, they prioritized stocking up on food. Jin Zuyan noticed that Jiao Lijai hadn't taken anything and said, "Ah, Zhai, I will help you load your supplies." Jiao Lijai nodded and replied, "Thank you, Brother Yan." When he heard her polite but distant tone, Jin Zuyan sighed and said, "Ah, Zhai, with our relationship, there is no need to be so polite with me." Ruffling her hair a few times, he turned and walked into the warehouse to start working. Meanwhile, Jiao Lijai wandered through the storage areas, inspecting the goods. This factory produced a wide variety of processed food. Besides cereals, milk, and dried goods, there were also bacon, ham, sausages, biscuits, cheese, and canned food. The warehouse was divided into sections for different types of products. Pei Yijun's team and the soldiers were currently loading up biscuits, dried food, and cereals. After making sure no one was watching, Jiao Lijai discreetly waved her hand. Instantly, large quantities of boxes near her disappeared. She walked slowly while storing canned food, cheese, milk, ham, sausages, and bacon into her space. Due to the vast size of the warehouse, no one noticed that more than half the supplies had disappeared. No one except Jin Zuyan. His eyes had been on her the entire time, and he clearly saw the supplies disappearing into thin air. Instead of being surprised, the corner of his lips lifted into a smile. His Aitg was smart and adorable. She knew exactly how to pick the best stuff for herself. 30 minutes later, Pei Yijun's team finished loading their supplies. He walked up to Jin Zuyan and said, "Captain Jin, we are done. We are heading to check out other areas." Jin Zuyan, not wanting to reveal Xiao Qi's spatial ability, simply nodded and said, "I will contact you via satellite phone when we are done." "All right." Before leaving, Pei Yijun glanced around, searching for Jiao Lijai. When he couldn't spot her, he hesitated briefly but ultimately turned and left. As their vehicles drove away, Jin Zuyan turned to his team and said, "No need to fill all the trucks, just fill up 2 trucks. Zhang Yuan frowned and asked, "Captain, what about the rest of the supplies?" "Let Xiao Qi store some. We will leave the rest." Zhang Yuan nodded and relayed the instructions to the soldiers. It wasn't a bad idea to leave some supplies behind. If they had thought to come here, other survivors would, too. And besides, Xiao Qi's storage space wasn't infinite. They still needed room for clothes and other necessities. Jiao Lijai watched as the soldiers continued loading supplies, taking note of one of them storing goods in his space. Her gaze shifted to the remaining stock. She wanted to take away everything. There was no guarantee that other survivors would come for these supplies. Rather than letting them go to waste, she might as well take them. She could use them later to trade for other resources or give them to the soldiers. But how could she take everything without alerting the soldiers? Chapter 54, Mutated Metal Type Ability. Before Jiao Lijai could figure out a plan, she saw Jin Zuyan giving orders for his team to move on to the next factory. Then, instead of following them, he walked toward her. Stopping in front of her, he smiled and said, "Aitg, you can take the rest." Jiao Lijai's eyes widened in surprise when she heard his words. It took her a moment to calm down and asked, "Brother Yan, you know I have space." Jin Zuyan nodded with a smile. "MHMM." He looked at her and his smile deepened as he said, "My Aitg is so smart. You have a space ability. In the future, I will be relying on you for food and drink, so you can't leave me behind." Hearing his words, Jiao Lijai stared at him, debating whether to scold him for his shamelessness. But when she saw the expectant gleam in his eyes, she swallowed her words and simply nodded. "Okay. Forget it, it's better to keep him close. In case he plans to tell others about my space, I can take action first," she thought inwardly. Jin Zuyan noticed the murderous intent flashing in her eyes, but he didn't care. It would be great if his Aitg could guard against others. As for himself, sooner or later she would accept him as her fiancé. With him standing guard outside, Jiao Lijai no longer had to worry about hiding her ability. Within 5 minutes, she had stored away everything. Afterward, the two of them drove to the next factory. Sitting in the passenger seat, Jiao Lijai realized something. She had once sworn never to trust anyone and never to reveal her space ability. Yet here she was, trusting Jin Zuyan without hesitation. And somehow, it didn't feel wrong. Thinking of this, she felt something was wrong and frowned. Jin Zuyan glanced at her, as he drove with a knowing smile playing on his lips. When they reached the next factory, the situation was different from the first. Behind the steel gate, a crowd of zombies reached out toward them while roaring wildly. Their rotten hands waved, trying to grab the prey in front of them. Roar! Standing at a distance, the soldiers looked at their captain, waiting for his order. Jin Zuyan looked at the number of zombies and made a rough estimation. Based on the crowd size, the number of zombies was around 300 to 400. If they used their abilities to attack, they could clear them from a distance. While he was still thinking about the best way to clear the zombies without creating too much noise, Aitg took several steps forward. The moment he raised his hands, Jiao Lijai had a bad feeling and said, "Wait." Crack, boom. Before she could finish her words, a thunderbolt had already fallen from the sky, striking the crowd of zombies with a loud sound. Roar, roar, roar. Bang, bangs, bang. Due to the loud explosion caused by his attack, more zombies gathered at the gate. They let out roars and banged on the gate. No matter how strong the gate was, it would be hard for it to withstand the pushing from so many zombies. When Jin Zuyan saw the gate was about to be breached, he said, "Wen Kai, Wenmo, strengthen the gate." "Yes, Captain." Letter 1D6ATF, letter 1D563, letter 1D556, letter 1D6AT, letter 1D6A0, letter 1D6AT. Letter 1D554, letter 1D428, letter 1D55E. As soon as they heard his order, they walked to the front and raised their hands. Under everyone's gaze, balls of metal at the size of a volleyball appeared out of thin air. In a few seconds, the balls flattened and became metal plates, which flew toward the gate. Then, as if possessing a mind of their own, the metal plates stabbed into the ground, forming a layer of metal walls around the entrance. When they saw this, Aitg and his team were taken aback. They hadn't expected the soldiers to have abilities as well. Standing beside Jin Zuyan, Jiao Lijai's eyes flashed with surprise. Although both of them were metal-type ability users, their abilities were different. One of them actually had the ability to create metal, while the other had the ability to control it. With the two working together, their metal-type abilities would be difficult to defeat during battle. After all, most metal-type ability users could only control metal. If they fought in an area without any metal, their abilities would be useless. But with someone who could create metal, they wouldn't have to worry about running out of weapons to attack during battle. Creation was one of the mutation types in elemental type abilities. It was extremely rare and powerful. However, the energy required to break through to the next level was several times more than what was needed for a normal ability. As a result, not many mutated elemental ability users were able to make a name for themselves or survive in the apocalypse due to their low level. 5 minutes later, Wen Kai and Wen Mo finished building another gate and returned to report. "Captain, it's done." "Well done," Jin Zuyan nodded. After the emergency had been dealt with, he turned to Pei Yijun and said, "Young Master Pei, your Thunder-type ability has strong attack power, but it's too loud. With your attack, we will have to kill all the zombies before we can enter the factory." Hearing this, Pei Yijun's face darkened. He was unhappy that his flaws had been exposed. "Besides using our abilities to attack, does Captain Jin have any other ideas?" he asked through gritted teeth. Seeing his anger, Jin Zuyan felt refreshed and replied with a smile. "Of course, we can only attack using our abilities in this situation, but I will take care of it. Young Master Pei, you can just wait." Although his tone was polite, his smug expression was asking for a beating. Pei Yijun gritted his teeth and said, "Then I will see how Captain Jin handles the zombies." "Sure, you and your team can watch and learn," Jin Zuyan said generously. Chapter 55, New Skill. After Jin Zuyan finished his words, he walked toward the wall. Bending his knees slightly, he leaped lightly and landed on top of it. The moment he stood there, the zombies pushed against each other, reaching out toward him. Lowering his head, he looked at them coldly. Every time he saw these brainless monsters, he was reminded of how his Aitg had been torn apart in front of him. The hatred in his heart toward zombies and humans ran so deep that even after he turned into one of them, he had still chosen to destroy everything and everyone with his own hands. But this time, he didn't plan to join them. He wanted to marry his Aitg and have a lot of bobbies with her. Zombies couldn't have bobbies after all. Unsheathing his longsword, he turned to Jiao Lijai and said with a smile, "Aitg, move back a little. It will be hot if you stand too close." When the soldiers heard this, they quickly moved 10 meters back, not forgetting to bring their sister-in-law with them. After making sure they were safe, Jin Zuyan narrowed his eyes, and in an instant, black flames enveloped his longsword. The flames danced wildly as the surrounding temperature suddenly rose. Jin Zuyan spread his legs and swung his sword horizontally. The next second, a crescent-shaped flame blade shot toward the zombies at high speed. Unlike other attacks, the moment the flames touched the zombies, they engulfed them and burned them instantly instead of exploding. Standing on the wall, Jin Zuyan sheathed his longsword and watched as the zombies were swallowed by his black flames. At this moment, he felt a surge of energy entering his body and gathering in the area below his navel. Feeling the cold and hot temperatures clashing inside him made him lift the corner of his lips. Standing below, Pei Yijun and his team couldn't see what was happening behind the gate. They only saw him swing his sword once and then stand there unmoving. They could still hear the roars of zombies and looked at him in confusion. Pei Yijun gazed at Jin Zuyan's back thoughtfully. Even though the zombies were still roaring, it was much quieter than before. Besides that, he could smell a burning scent in the air. While everyone was confused by his actions, Jiao Lijai's eyes brightened. That move was one of Jin Zuyan's favorite attack skills. As a fire-type ability user, he preferred using his sword over his ability. However, after several years of the apocalypse, a normal sword wouldn't be able to injure zombies, let alone kill them anymore. So, he combined his fire with his sword, turning it into the deadliest weapon. She never expected him to create this move so early. As she thought about his attack just now, an idea formed in her mind. If he is able to do that, then shouldn't I be able to use that move too? As soon as this thought filled her mind, she couldn't wait any longer. She took out her boning knife from her backpack. Holding the handle, she focused her energy on her palm and slowly transferred it to the blade. The next moment, the boning knife was covered with a layer of water. Unlike fire, water wouldn't be able to deal much damage, so she controlled it and focused it on the sharp edge of the blade. Rather than covering the entire blade with water, she retracted some of her energy, leaving only a thin layer of water on the sharp edge. She was so focused on testing this method that she didn't notice the soldiers and Pei Yijun staring at her. After almost 10 minutes, she finally managed to form a water blade along the sharp edge. She raised her blade and examined it under the sunlight. Then, she reached out and touched the water blade with her forefinger. In an instant, blood seeped from her fingertips. Seeing this, she smiled, feeling satisfied with its sharpness. Just as she withdrew her energy and the water blade turned into a puddle, someone grabbed her hand. Before she could react, she felt something soft and warm lick her fingertip. Her mind exploded when she saw Jin Zuyan sucking the blood from her fingertip. A moment later, he let her go and said with a frown, "Aitg, why are you so careless? Fortunately, it's only a small wound." What do you think you are doing?" she hissed while pulling her hand back. "I'm treating your wound." Jin Zuyan replied matter-of-factly. Hearing his words and seeing his innocent gaze, Jiao Lijai almost vomited blood from anger. She glared at him and said, "We are not that close for you to do that." As soon as she said those words, she saw Jin Zuyan's eyes turn red and a layer of tear threatening to fall from his eyes. She was stunned by his teary eyes and a grieved expression. "Why are you crying?" she asked in a low voice. Jin Zuyan reached out to hold her sleeve and asked sadly, "Aitg, you don't want me?" Jiao Lijai rubbed her aching temple and said with a frown, "Brother Yan, we just met again after so many years. It's impossible for me to feel that way about you. You doing this, it makes me uncomfortable." Hearing this, Jin Zuyan let go of her sleeve and lowered his head. After a moment of silence, he nodded and said, "I understand." Then he turned around and walked toward the gate while saying, "Wenmo, open the gate." Looking at his dejected back, Jiao Lijai felt guilty for saying those words to him, but she couldn't accept his overly intimate behavior. They had only reunited for a few hours, and both of them were adults now. It was impossible for her to treat him the same way as when they were young. With his back facing her, Jiao Lijai couldn't see his expression. Therefore, she missed the smile in Jin Zuyan's eyes. Chapter 56, Anger and Fear. As he walked to the gate, Jin Zuyan thought, she is too on guard. I must take this slowly. Tilda, my Aitg is cute even when she is angry. What should I do? I want to hug and kiss her again. Despite his perverted thoughts, his expression remained gloomy and his eyes were cold. When the soldiers saw their captain like this, they straightened their backs, not daring to look directly into his eyes. Under the tense atmosphere, Wenmo raised his hands toward the gate and clenched them. The next moment, the metal plate shifted shape, transforming into a spear. With a wave of his hand, the spear flew into his grasp. After catching it, he looked at his captain and nodded. Jin Zuyan turned to Chen Luzi. Understanding his captain's meaning, he checked the map inside his head. After a moment, he said, "Captain, the area within a 100-meter radius is clear." Jin Zuyan nodded and said, "Let's go." The soldiers climbed into their vehicles and drove toward the warehouse. Sitting inside the armored vehicle, Chen Luzi scanned the surroundings with his mind. Seeing the dense red dots inside the warehouse, he said, "Captain, there is a group of zombies trapped inside. More than 100. Seated in the passenger seat, Jin Zuyan picked up the radio and said, "Those with abilities besides Zio Qi, get down and clear the zombies. The rest of you, stay in the car and cover the outside area." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Yuan parked the armored vehicle near the warehouse entrance. Jin Zuyan, Chen Luzi, and 6 soldiers stepped out of the vehicles. Since all of them had awakened abilities, killing zombies was relatively easy for them. Just as they were about to open the warehouse door, they heard the sound of a car door closing. Turning around, Jin Zuyan saw Jiao Lijai walking over while holding her boning knife. "Aitg, why are you coming down? Just stay in the car. It will be done in a moment," he said. Brother Yan, I'm not a delicate flower. I want to fight alongside you and others, Jiao Lizhe replied with a smile. Seeing her determined gaze, Jin Zuyan sighed and said, Stay close to me. Okay, Jiao Lizhe nodded. Afterward, Wenmo unlocked and opened the heavy warehouse door. With his metal-type ability, it was as effortless as waving his hand. The moment the door opened, zombie roars were heard coming from inside. Roar. They are coming, Qin Luzi said. The soldiers unsheathed their blades and swung them the moment the zombies pounced at them. With each swing, zombie heads either rolled to the ground or split open. Black blood and rotting flesh covered the floor, filling the air with a thick, rancid stench. Standing in the middle of the formation, Jiao Lizhe didn't have a chance to act. She could feel that with just a bit more battle experience, she would break through to level 1. However, at this rate, she wasn't getting the opportunity she needed. After a brief moment of thought, she rushed forward and leaped directly into a cluster of zombies. The instant Jin Zuyan noticed a shadow flash past him, his eyes widened in shock as he shouted, Aitg! Watching her recklessly charge into the front lines, his heart leaped into his throat, and he immediately followed after her. Hearing him call her name, Jiao Lizhe's eyes flickered, but she quickly refocused. As she landed, she swung her boning knife in a vertical arc, slicing the zombie standing below her in half. Black blood and rotten intestines splattered across the ground as the zombie collapsed with a heavy thud. Roar! As soon as she touched the ground, she bent her body and delivered a powerful back kick to the zombie behind her. Duog, crack. The zombie was struck in the chest and hurled backward. Its chest was dented due to broken bones as it crashed into several zombies and blocked their advance. Without wasting a second, Jiao Lizhe swung her boning knife, beheading 2 zombies to her side. With the water blade coating her knife, her kills became smoother. Not only did it conserve her ability energy, but it also reduced stamina consumption. As she killed the zombies, she thought that it was no wonder Jin Zuyan preferred fusing his ability with his longsword. This method was really great. Roar! Hearing another zombie's roar behind her, Jiao Lizhe turned, ready to strike. But before she could act, the zombies in front of her were suddenly cleaved in half at the waist. The severed zombies fell to the ground with a thud. With their heads intact, they remained alive. As they crawled toward her, their other half were still twitching on the ground. When she looked up, she met Jin Zuyan's furious gaze. Raising his sword, he lunged forward. Letter 1D6ATF, letter 1D5FF, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D41A, letter 1D430, letter 1D6AT, letter 1D41C, letter 1D698, letter 1D55E. Startled by his sudden attack, Jiao Lizhe felt a chill run down her spine. The next moment, she was pulled into a broad chest. At the same time, Jin Zuyan drove his longsword through a zombie's skull, killing it instantly. Holding her close with one arm, he swung his sword in a graceful arc, beheading the remaining crawling zombies. Jiao Lizhe stood frozen, her mind momentarily blank as she listened to the rapid thumping of a heartbeat. She blinked, and after a moment, realized it was Jin Zuyan's heartbeats. Raising her head, she saw his pale lips and tightly clenched jaw. Then, she noticed his arm around her waist trembling. After ensuring the surrounding zombies were dead, Jin Zuyan loosened his hold and looked at her. There were so many things he wanted to say, but when he saw her confused expression, he didn't know where to begin. To her, he was just a childhood friend she had reunited with hours ago. But to him, she was someone he had yearned for over decades. He had lost her once. He couldn't afford to lose her again. Seeing her reckless actions just now filled him with anger and fear. Chapter 57, a level 3 zombie. Jin Zuyan and Jiao Lizhe stared at each other for a long moment before he finally asked, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Jiao Lizhe nodded. Jin Zuyan scanned her from head to toe. Only after confirming she was unharmed did he relax and let her go. Then, he said, "Aitg, don't be so reckless next time." "Brother Yan, I know what I'm doing. I'm more than capable of killing these zombies, Jiao Lijai replied with confidence. Hearing her words, Jin Zuyan lowered his gaze. He had seen her fight just now. Her movements were sharp, ruthless. Every strike was meant to kill. In the apocalypse, such a combat style was normal. But for someone who had grown up in a peaceful society, it was impossible to fight like that without experience or long-term training. Only those who had been through countless battles of life and death could execute such precise, deadly movements. Reaching this conclusion, he was almost certain his Aitg had been reborn just like him. Thinking about her tragic death in their past life, he clenched his fists tightly. Perhaps shielding her wasn't the best way to ensure her survival. If she needed to grow stronger, he wouldn't stand in her way. Instead, he would stay by her side and support her. Despite the countless thoughts spinning in his mind, only a few seconds had passed. Looking at her, he made up his mind and said, Aitg, I won't stop you from joining the battle, but you must protect yourself well. Hearing this, Jiao Lijai sighed in relief and nodded. Brother Yan, I will protect myself well. While the two of them were chatting, the soldiers walked around the warehouse to check the situation. Qin Luzi was approaching the corner of the warehouse when he suddenly noticed a red dot moving toward him at high speed. Compared to the level 1 zombies, this dot was significantly larger and faster. He quickly bent his knees and leaped backward. Before he even landed, a shadow crashed into the spot where he had just been standing. Boom! The impact shattered the ground, sending dust and debris into the air, completely obscuring his vision. Narrowing his eyes, Qin Luzi saw the dot moving toward him again in his mind. He knew it was too late to dodge after landing, so while still midair, he waved his hand and manipulated the air around him. Grrrth. When he heard a sharp growl, his body abruptly shifted to the side, narrowly avoiding the zombie's sharp claws. Boom! Roar! The zombie, enraged by its failed attack, threw its head back and let out an ear-splitting roar. Feeling the pressure radiating from the creature, Qin Luzi immediately tasted iron on his throat and realized he couldn't handle this alone. Instead of counterattacking, he gathered his energy into his feet and dashed toward his captain. With wind boosting his movement, his speed increased several-fold. In less than 5 seconds, he reached Jin Zuyan and said urgently, Captain, this zombie is extremely dangerous and fast. Before Jin Zuyan could respond, Jiao Lijai suddenly shouted, Dodge! The moment her warning rang out, Jin Zuyan yanked Qin Luzi's collar as he jumped to the side while she leaped in the opposite direction. Crack! Roar! Jiao Lijai's eyes widened as she felt the immense pressure radiating from the zombie. Her breath hitched as she muttered, It's actually a level 3 zombie. She hadn't even reached level 1 yet, and now she was up against a level 3. The situation was beyond logic. How are the zombies evolving this fast? But there was no time to dwell on the thought. The zombie had already shifted its focus to her and was charging at full speed. Her grip tightened around her boning knife as she raised it to block the incoming attack. Clang, crack. The force sent her flying several meters before she crashed into the ground with a heavy thud. Her boning knife was broken, and her water blade covering the knife already turned into a pool of water on the ground. Aitg. Jin Zuyan's eyes widened in horror when he saw the zombie rushing towards her. Without hesitation, he tightened his grip on his sword and rushed toward the zombie. Whoosh! Black flames engulfed his longsword as he closed in. When he was 2 meters away, he slashed horizontally. Sensing the danger, the zombie jumped back, narrowly dodging the attack. Boom! The wave of flame hit the ground and left a deep, long crack. The next second, Jin Zuyan raised his left hand, summoning 5 fire arrows. As he threw them at the zombie, he dashed in a different direction, looking for an opening. The zombie dodged in the other direction, but before it could touch the ground, a longsword suddenly appeared in its peripheral vision, aiming straight for its head. Seeing this, the zombie raised his arm to block the attack. Crash, thud. Before Jin Zuyan could send another attack, the zombie lashed out with a powerful kick, sending him flying several meters back. It then stood there with its pitch-black eyes locked onto him. Its left arm, severed at the forearm, lay on the ground. Black blood dripped steadily from the wound. Cough. Jin Zuyan coughed up a mouthful of blood as he hit the ground. A sharp pain pierced his chest. One of my ribs is probably broken, he thought grimly. Roar. With a furious growl, the zombie lunged at him again. Jin Zuyan rolled to the side just in time, narrowly avoiding the sharp claws. The zombie was relentless before Jin Zuyan could regain his footing. It raised its arm and aimed its claws at his throat. Whoosh. Seeing this, Jin Zuyan lifted his sword to block the attack. But before the claws could hit him, a water blade suddenly sliced through the zombie's raised arm. Slash. Roar. The severed arm hit the ground with a thud, and black blood splattered across Jin Zuyan's face and uniform. He clenched his lips tightly, forcing down the wave of disgust rising in his throat. Pushing himself up, he staggered backward. Chapter 58. I crawled back from hell just to find you. Suddenly, a pair of hands steadied Jin Zuyan from behind. His body leaned against a small but firm shoulder. Turning his head, he met Jiao Lijai's worried gaze. Letter 1D453, letter 1D45F, letter 1D452, letter 1D626, letter 1D4CC, letter 1D452. Letter 1D4B8, letter 1D630, letter 1D45A. At that moment, a thought crossed his mind. My Aitg is actually worried about me. It seems that getting hurt once in a while isn't so bad. As the two exchanged glances for a second, Chin Luzi raised both hands, summoning several wind blades above his palms. Clenching his teeth, he flung them at the zombie. Even after losing both arms, the level 3 zombie remained terrifyingly fast. It leaped, dodging the incoming wind blades, and pounced straight at Chin Luzi. Seeing this, Chin Luzi's eyes flashed and his breath was caught in his throat. He had overexerted himself summoning too many wind blades, and now his energy was nearly depleted. Dizzy from exhaustion, his reaction was a second slower. As the zombie's widened mouth came close, a chilling realization hit him. He was done for. Stab. Before the zombie could sink its teeth into his neck, a metal spear shot through its mouth from the side. Crack. The spear's momentum carried it forward, pinning the zombie to the warehouse wall with a loud sound. Chin Luzi turned and saw Wen Mo, and the remaining soldiers rushed in as they launched attacks with their abilities. Though the zombie was immobilized, it was still a level 3 zombie. Their attacks barely left a scratch, and their energy reserves were quickly running dry. Most of them hadn't even reached level 1 yet, meaning their ability's energy pool was extremely limited. Seeing that the zombie was almost struggling free, the soldiers turned to their captain, their eyes filled with urgency. At this moment, their captain sat on the ground, his face pale as he coughed up blood. Seeing him in such a state, the soldiers felt a wave of despair. How were they supposed to survive this battle? Just as hopelessness settled in, a bolt of thunder spear suddenly shot toward the zombie. However, before it could strike, a water disc collided with it midair. Crack. In an instant, the water disc absorbed the lightning and continued its trajectory toward the zombie at a fast speed. Crash. Within seconds, the water disc sliced clean through the zombie's neck, making a sharp U-turn in the air. The headless body collapsed, but the water disc didn't stop. It zipped through the corpse multiple times. By the time the remains hit the ground, they had been reduced to several mutilated chunks of rotten flesh. The next moment, the water disc flew toward the zombie's severed head, splitting it in two before returning to Jiao Lijai. Standing beside Jin Zuyan, Jiao Lijai opened her palm, and the water disc hovered above it. She clenched her fist, and the spinning blade turned into a harmless splash of water. Cough. Her body was not as good as in her previous life, and being hit once by the zombie caused her to suffer an internal injury. Her knees weakened, and she fell to the ground. Aitg. Jin Zuyan appeared beside her in an instant, catching her as she fell. Seeing her pale face, he immediately held her hand and transferred his energy into her body. A comforting warmth spread through her, soothing the splitting headache and severe pain in her body. Slowly, she opened her eyes and saw Jin Zuyan's face covered in cold sweat and his complexion ashen. She squeezed his hand weakly and murmured, "Brother Yan, it's enough." Jin Zuyan looked at her with deep concern and asked, "Aitg, how do you feel?" "I'm fine." Just then, the soldiers and Aitg's team walked over. Jin Zuyan withdrew his energy and helped Jiao Lijai to her feet. Not long after, Aitg reached them and asked, "Jiao Lijai, are you all right?" Before she could respond, Jin Zuyan answered coldly, "Aitg will be fine. Thank you for your concern." Jiao Lijai glanced at his cold face and added, "Senior, I'm fine." Chu Zhimiao stepped forward, reaching out her hands and said, "Lijai, let me help you back to the car. We need to bandage your wounds." Before her hand could touch Jiao Lijai's arm, Jin Zuyan abruptly pulled Jiao Lijai back, dodging the gesture. His sharp gaze locked onto Chu Zhimiao as he stated firmly, "I will take care of Aitg. You and your team can focus on gathering supplies." Turning to his own men, he gave the order, "Inform the others and start loading the supplies." "Yes, Captain." Without another word, he bent down, scooped Jiao Lijai into his arms, and strode toward the warehouse entrance. The soldiers exchanged knowing glances as they watched their captains retreating back, then shifted their attention to Aitg's darkened expression. Without hesitation, they hurried to call their comrades to begin transporting supplies. Li Yang hesitated before speaking. "Brother Pei, should we?" Aitg turned and said, "Get the supplies." "Understood." Outside the warehouse, Jin Zuyan carried Jiao Lijai to her car and gently placed her in the passenger seat. Before he could turn away, she reached out and grasped his wrist. "Brother Yan, I will be fine after some rest. Don't worry about me. You should treat your own wounds first," she said softly. Jin Zuyan sighed when he heard her words and said, "Aitg, my self-recovery is several times faster than others. My wounds will be completely healed in an hour." Jiao Lijai's fingers stiffened at his words. She looked at him and asked, "Brother Yan, what do you mean?" Without answering, Jin Zuyan lifted her into his arms and sat down in the passenger seat with her on his lap. Closing the car door, he lowered his head, meeting her eyes. His warm fingers brushed against her cheek as he whispered, "Aitg, I'm the same as you. I crawled back from hell just to find you." The moment she heard this, Jiao Lijai's eyes widened, and her heart leaped into her throat. Chapter 59, Get Stronger to Survive. Jin Zuyan wrapped his arms around Jiao Lijai, burying his head in the crook of her neck. His grip tightened as he whispered, "Aitg, I can't lose you again." A faint tremor was heard in his voice, showing his vulnerability to her blatantly. Jiao Lijai was stunned. It took her a long moment to process his words. Then, she felt something damp as warmth spread across her neck. It was tears. Her lips parted and she said, "Jin Zuyan, that person was really you." Jin Zuyan's hold on her tightened as he said, "Aitg, I'm sorry I didn't come for you sooner. I thought keeping my distance would keep you safe, but I never expected that because of my cowardice, it would harm you." His voice trailed off at the end, but she understood. Even though that past life had ended, she could still feel the agonizing pain of being torn apart alive. From the way he looked at her, she could see his feelings for her clearly. She wasn't naive. She had known from the moment she was kissed. As an orphan, she had always yearned for a family. But in her previous life, she had been betrayed by the one she trusted most. How could she easily open her heart again? And yet, she couldn't bring herself to push away the warmth of his embrace. Slowly, she raised her arms and wrapped them around him. Jin Zuyan's body tensed for a split second before gradually relaxing. As she leaned against his chest, a thought surfaced in her mind. "I will give myself one more chance and take this bet. Maybe this time, I will win this bet." After a moment of hugging, they heard a knock on the window. Raising his head, Jin Zuyan saw Zhang Yuan scratching his head outside. Lowering the window slightly, he asked, "What's wrong?" Glancing at the woman sitting on his captain's lap, Zhang Yuan immediately realized he had interrupted something. But he braced himself and said, "Captain, we need you to check on something." Jin Zuyan was annoyed at being interrupted, but knew what was more important. He nodded and said, "I will be there in a moment." "Understood," Zhang Yuan nodded and left. Once he was gone, Jin Zuyan let out a sigh and said, "Aitg, rest for a while. When we are done loading the supplies, I will let you know. You can take the rest of the supplies with you." Hearing this, Zhao Lijai nodded and replied, "Okay." Before opening the door, he leaned down and kissed her forehead. Then, he carried her out of the car and placed her back in the passenger seat. After patting her head, he closed the door. Watching him walk away, Zhao Lijai suddenly felt shy. In both her lifetimes, this was the first time she had been so intimate with a man. Although he was her childhood friend, she couldn't help but feel embarrassed and awkward. Touching her chest, she muttered under her breath, "Stupid heart, stop beating so fast." She took several deep breaths to calm herself before pulling out 2 bottles of pond water from her space. Even though she had decided to accept him, she still didn't dare let him know about her space's special attributes. It was better for him to assume her space was just an ordinary storage space like others. After drinking both bottles, she finally felt better. Closing her eyes, she checked her energy and noticed that after the battle against the level 3 zombie, the barrier in her core was loosening. Maybe if she absorbed some crystal cores, she could break through. Feeling hungry, she pulled out 2 loaves of bread and ate them with canned tuna and cheese. Meanwhile, Jin Zuyan entered the warehouse and asked, "What's wrong?" Seeing him return, Aitg said, "Captain, these are the crystals we collected. Just now, your fiancé helped us kill the big guy and even saved our brothers' lives. How should we divide these?" Jin Zuyan glanced at the crystal cores and said, "Give them all to her." The soldiers exchanged looks, thinking their captain was trying to use these crystals to coax their sister-in-law. After all, their vice-captain had said she was crying when he went to call their captain. Girls like this kind of thing. With a knowing smile, Aitg packed all the crystals into a bag and handed it to Jin Zuyan, saying, "Captain, we don't even know what these crystals are for. If my sister-in-law likes them, she can have them all." Jin Zuyan raised his eyebrows when he heard his generous words. Taking the bag, he said, "In the future, I will make sure none of you ever have to worry about food or drink again." The soldiers grinned at his words and said in unison, "Thank you, Captain." "All right, finish loading the supplies. We need to find a place to stay for the night," Jin Zuyan said. "Yes, Captain." While the soldiers busied themselves loading the trucks and armored vehicles and filling up their backpacks, Pei Yijun and his team stood outside, waiting for them. Li Yang nudged Chu Zhimiao and whispered, "My oh Miao, do you think Brother Pei likes Zhao Lijai?" "I don't know," Chu Zhimiao said, shaking her head. "Even if Yijun likes her, she already has a fiancé," Feng Yun said suddenly. "Senior Feng, their relationship doesn't seem real. Maybe Captain Jin lied," Han Jai chimed in. "Whether it's real or not isn't our business," Feng Yun replied. "Right now, we should focus on surviving and think about how to improve our strength. Worrying about other people's relationships won't save you in a dangerous situation," he added solemnly. Hearing this, they dropped the topic, each lost in thought. They worried about their families but lacked the strength or courage to find them alone. For now, they could only follow Pei Yijun and hope the government would help later. He is right. They need to get stronger so they can survive and reunite with their families. Chapter 60, System or Space, 1. Meanwhile, inside the car across from them, Zhao Lijai leaned against the seat with her eyes closed. After drinking the pond water and eating, she suddenly felt her energy go on a rampage. This was a sign of breaking through. If she could push past the barrier, she would advance to the next level. If she failed, she could be injured, or worse, die in the process. Focusing her mind, she guided her energy through her veins, gathering it in her core. Unlike zombies, ability users' crystal cores only solidified after death. When alive, their cores functioned more like a cultivator's dantian, storing energy in the brain and circulating it through the veins. Cold sweat covered her forehead and back as she endured the excruciating pain. It felt as if countless ants were gnawing at her from the inside while her body was being torn apart and reconstructed. The energy kept circulating through her body, each cycle pushing out impurities through her pores. After countless cycles, the barrier finally cracked. The moment it broke, a surge of energy rushed into her brain, instantly relieving the pain. Her body felt light and refreshed. Opening her eyes, she noticed a sticky layer of black liquid covering her skin and frowned. She smelled worse than a zombie. Locking the car doors, she entered her space. As soon as she stepped inside, she rushed to take a shower. Perhaps her soap was better in this life, as she managed to wash away the filth in one go. In her previous life, she had to scrub herself raw before she was able to clean the black liquid on her body. After changing into fresh clothes, she left her space and reappeared in the car. Stepping out, she took a deep breath and almost choked. Her 5 senses had improved. She could see farther and hear more clearly. The downside: the rancid smell was even stronger than before, making her nose numb. Pinching her nose, she walked toward the warehouse. Just as she stepped inside, she saw Jin Zuyan approaching. He handed her a bag, he said. "Aitg, we are done. You can keep the rest of the supplies. These are the crystal cores we gathered. It's for you." Zhao Lijai looked at him for a moment and asked, "Brother Yan, are you giving me pocket money?" Jin Zuyan was momentarily stunned by her words before he chuckled and replied, "If you want to think of it that way, sure." Then he rubbed her cheek and added, "Aitg, I will work hard to raise you." For some reason, Zhao Lijai blushed when she met his gaze. She pushed his hand away and said, "Help me guard the door." Seeing her shy expression, Jin Zuyan was in a great mood. He nodded and replied, "Okay." After the soldiers left, he closed the door and stood outside while Zhao Lijai quickly stored the rest of the supplies in her space. 15 minutes later, she walked out and said, "Brother Yan, I'm done." Jin Zuyan checked his watch and said, "It will be dark soon. We should find a place to stay for the night." "Okay," Zhao Lijai agreed readily. They climbed into their car and left the warehouse. Since there were still supplies in other warehouses, they decided to camp in an open field outside the factory district and continue checking the supplies in other warehouses. Staying outside was dangerous, but it was still better than returning to Linen University. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they parked their vehicles in a circle. Then, Wen Kai and Wen Mo built a metal wall around them for protection. Tonight, they would take turns on watch. With plenty of supplies, the soldiers built 3 bonfires, while the Wen brothers made 3 large pots and several iron skewers. Jin Zuyan's team had a water-type ability user, and they called him over. "Kaiyan Feng, come help us fill the pot with water." Zhang Yuan waves at him. Chen Kaiyan Feng walked over, only to stop in shock when he saw the size of the pot. Pointing at it, he asked, "Vice Captain, do you have any idea how much water you need to fill just half of this?" Zhang Yuan laughs when he sees his brother's shock and replies, "Well, we only need half of the pot." "I don't know if I can get that much water," Chen Kaiyan Feng said with a sigh. "Just fill it as much as you can," Zhang Yuan said with a grin. With no other choice, Chen Kaiyan Feng could only place his palm above the pot and start filling it with water. He had just awakened his ability and was hungry, so he could only fill 1/3 of the pot before turning pale. Seeing this, Zhang Yuan quickly stopped him and said, "That's enough. Thank you for your hard work, Kaiyan Feng." Chen Kaiyan Feng sat on the ground while enduring the headache and said apologetically, "Vice Captain, I'm sorry." Zhang Yuan patted his shoulder and said, "Why are you sorry? We can just use the water you prepared before. Go rest. When the food is ready, I will call you." "Okay." After he had left, Zhang Yuan stood up, planning to get some water. But before he could leave, Zhao Lijai walked over and asked, "Vice Captain, do you need any help?" "Sister-in-law, you are here. I'm going to get some water. We plan to cook some rice for dinner. You can rest. We can take care of it, Zhang Yuan said with a smile. Hearing this, Jiao Lijai said and walked to the pot. I'm a water-type ability user. Let me help you. Unlike Chen Qianfeng, she didn't place her hands above the pot but flicked her wrist, creating a large water ball instead. She moved her hand, and the water ball floated closer to the pot, stopping when it was above the pot. With another flick of her fingers, the water slowly trickled in. After breaking through to level 1, her control over her energy improved significantly.